All right, good afternoon or good morning, I guess, wherever you're watching this presentation. My name is Gil Rogers. I am the Senior Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Partnerships here at Platform Q Education. And I'm excited to bring to you today a quick update discussing the top 5 trends in international student engagement. Before we get started, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the agenda for this presentation. Feel free to skip ahead if you need to, or come back depending on what topic is interesting to you. But first thing we're going to do is talk about the international recruitment landscape, some updated trends and perspectives that we're hearing and seeing with respect to identifying and reaching prospective students around the globe. Then we're going to discuss 5 key strategies from leading institutions that are combining online and offline tactics to really boost conversion and yield and student engagement and student success. Then we're going to talk about how you can get started immediately with some of these ideas, and then open it up for any questions and answers that you might have in the chat tool that you see on the side. So as we get started, talking about the international recruitment landscape, it's really important for us to take a step back and think about the way things used to be and the way things are today, so we can address how we're going to move forward. So when we think about the international recruitment landscape in the past, there were really a small volume of providers of student data, and really it's a combination of travel, buying lists from sources, and then other smaller things, potentially like working with faculty from specific markets and other areas to identify students. But the challenge has been, results are varied, somewhat predictive, but pretty varied with respect to outreach. And then of course it's resources beyond just the travel and list buys, but how do you reach students throughout the process? And obviously over the past 5 years, 10 years or so, this hasn't gotten any easier when we think about the way students and schools connect, right? Resources have expanded, results remain varied. The current climate, makes personalization even more important. As we've seen over time, the proliferation of digital marketing and social media, and especially in unique markets like China, make it harder for institutions to really juggle all these things. And then of course, the current climate in the United States makes it a little tricky to get your voice out there and to make sure that students know that they're welcome on your campus. Things like safety on campuses has become a big concern, and a number of other issues that I'm sure those viewing the presentation know about. This is some data that I'm sure you're familiar with as well. We're seeing a negative trend in many markets of interest in U.S. education, which makes it difficult when your base is getting smaller overall to hit your aggressive numbers. And even if you're doing well with reaching and engaging your international audience, you're chasing the sun in a lot of respects, right? When you think about time zones are a thing, right? If you are based in California and you're trying to attract students from India, or you're in New York and you're trying to recruit students from China, there's challenges with getting in front of those students at time zone times that are appropriate for them, but also not asking your team to really work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So there's that challenge to think about. And finally, there's the student perspective. We know that based on the current environment, that the need to put a face to a name in an environment full of uncertainty is really important, right? So students value that perspective of being able to talk to a person. That's why Skype conversations are a thing, right? Because it makes it easier for you to connect with that student one-on-one and answer their questions. We also know that EDU branded content across all audiences, traditional first-year domestic undergrad, graduate students, international students, are generally rated as the most trusted source of college information. This makes sense when you think about the fact that students are going to be picking up a lot of material, seeing a lot of content across the web. When it's your institution's content specifically, it looks, feels, and acts like an official document. So even if it might not be the most influential piece of material, like a brochure from a college fair, et cetera, students at least know that that's the official content from the school, and what's inside of it can be trusted. And then finally, we know globally that more and more of our prospective students are being influenced by one-to-one chat. Text messaging is a thing, right? And it's growing as far as an influencer of engagement and influencer opportunity. So what we've done here at Platform Q Education is we've developed a platform called Conduit, which combines these 3 truths together on an easy to access and immediately available platform. And I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the features and components of Conduit, but think about a place where students can consume institutional branded content, engage with key influencers, put a face to a name, and have those chat resources available. That's what we do here to develop those strategies. But you came here today to learn about 5 key strategies that are being used by leading institutions. So now that we're kind of grounded on the current landscape, the current marketplace, we're going to talk about 5 key strategies that we've seen that have been effective at engaging students, generating demand, supporting application completion, and supporting enrollment at partner institutions. So the first is, making EDU content easy to find and your staff accessible, right? Which can be difficult. Your website serves many audiences. You've got your traditional first-year undergrads, you've got your alumni, you've got your current students, you've got your faculty. Making your content, particularly for international enrollment, may be difficult from an institutional culture perspective, but it's critical when it comes to making sure that students can find the information that's important to them. And then making your staff accessible can be tricky as well. Again, like I talked about before, with time zone concerns and challenges, how do you make your website content as responsive to your prospective students as possible? And when I talk about responsive, I'm not talking about mobile optimized and that's a given. But how do you make it so that a student who's actively researching you on your website can get connected with a counselor as quickly as possible, knowing that a student isn't online that your staff isn't online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we have an example here from Valencia College, and you see here Valencia right on their admissions page. They break out their different types of students, new students, and then they have a section specifically for international students that is there for a quick, easy destination. If a student goes to valenciacollege.edu, clicks on admissions, this is going to be the next click that they can make as a prospective student, which is great. Once a student is on the International Student Services page for Valencia College, they of course have access to being able to request information, start the application process. But you see on the side, there's also this Contact Us widget that allows a student to ask a question and chat live with a counselor, which is a great way to make the content interactive and make it so that as a student is browsing the international page on the website, they're able to get the content that they're looking for. And you see here when they pop out that module, what Valencia does is actually schedules chats throughout the year at specific times, so their team knows they can be answering questions from prospective students at a specific time on the website. And students can see, okay, there's an opportunity here for me to chat with a counselor from 10 to 12 on May 17th, right? So there's that great opportunity for that continuous engagement and continuous way for a student to ask a question. Now, you're not online 24/7, but what's great is you see on the widget there's an ask a question button that then would create a request for information form, so that on every site, on every page on the international section of the website, a student could submit a question, and now you're going to generate inquiries directly from each page of your website versus having them have to dig to find a way to request information. So it's a great way to speed up that process as well. The next opportunity we have is promoting on-the-ground events with online tools. And this is a great way to marry the two, right? Travel is going to be and should be a component of a good enrollment strategy for most institutions, right? You need to be able to put that face to the name, have the in-market presence with Build Your Brand, builds trust, but you want to also maximize the outcomes of your travel throughout the process as well. So Stevens Institute of Technology saw, what many institutions see, which is the China challenge, right? China's great firewall keeps, US-based social media blocked from the general public. They have their own in-market social media. You can use things like create an account on WeChat and those sorts of tools. But the reality is if you're trying to develop an on-the-ground presence, you got to be creative and find ways to get to the students that you're trying to reach. So what Stevens did is they knew they were going to be traveling in key markets throughout the country, and they leveraged text messaging to drive attendance at those events. So when you think about, we're going to be in China next week at a regional reception in Beijing or wherever, you can identify the students in your list that you're trying to reach and send them a text saying, hey, see you at such and such hotel at this time. And you could even have a link for them to submit a question ahead of time, so you can make that event even more interactive. So this is a great way to maximize event attendance, not unlike you might do at a regional event in the US or an on-campus event ahead of time with reminders ahead of the events. But using QMessage, which is a global SMS texting tool, you can now reach students in about 190 or so countries instead of just being limited to the US and Canada with your broadcast reminders. The next is casting a net without leaving your desk, right? A lot of institutions leverage, what we call armchair recruitment. With respect to reaching students in international markets. You don't have the budget to be in every single country you want to reach. You don't have the time to be on a plane to all these places. Although if you are on a plane that often, then you've got really great miles and status and points and those sorts of things. But I digress. When we're casting a global net without leaving your desk, this can be really helpful, especially in areas that are not necessarily marquee markets for reaching international prospects. We all know if you're not in California, Florida, or New York or Texas, there's going to be potentially some challenges in attracting students to your market and really demonstrating the value of the education on your campus, good or for bad, right? So one example of this is Dickinson State University. They hosted a webcast for their international prospects, and they made it available 24 hours in an on-demand setting. They hosted a live chat at a reasonable time frame for their staff to staff it without having to be awake for 24 hours. And they also made it easy to access by using a direct login URLs. We call them Q tokens, but the idea is that when they sent these links out to their prospect database, with one click, their students were able to access their event without having to register, without having to log in, but also having all the tracking of who attended and how engaged they were so they can craft their follow-up. And for perspective, Dickinson State is in North Dakota. They're, of course, a great institution, but they're not what you would consider a large flagship public, U.S. research-based institution. So they're not going to get the same cachet as an Ivy League institution in many international markets. So they have to work a little bit harder, right? They attracted 55 students to this event, which again is about the size of their overall campus population for international students with this one program. So great opportunity again to leverage the online event to maximize reach and maximize interest for your market, especially if you're not a flagship public or an Ivy League institution, which most institutions aren't. The next is maximizing yield of pre-arrival content. So once you've got, let's say you're at the point in the process, which is where many of us are now, where we've been through the application process, we've got paperwork out to students, they're getting ready to arrive in the fall. Most international students are not going to be coming to multiple orientations, not making multiple trips to campus. Your pre-arrival, your pre-enrollment orientation, your last one of the year is probably where many of them are going to end up. So what do we do in the summer months to make sure that our students see the value, understand the campus culture, know what they need to do ahead of time, while also making it not an overwhelming process for them, which might scare them off to another institution or scare them off from coming in general, right? So one example of this is Azusa Pacific University. What they've done is they've developed a pre-arrival program in conjunction with their orientation program so that their incoming international students have the opportunity to see what to expect, what to say to a visa officer, what are the things you need to do when you're getting ready to come to campus so that they arrive prepared and ready to go versus coming in kind of lost and overwhelmed. Last year, Azusa reached nearly half of their enrolled international student populations through their conduit platform by hosting these events and moving the communications and workshops earlier in the cycle. So students are not kind of floating out there with nothing to do or not knowing what the next steps are. By leveraging the online platform ahead of the arrival, they were able to make sure the students were served throughout the summer and given that opportunity. The last is leveraging online events to maximize reach. So I spoke before about Dickinson State and how they were able to reach 55 students and really focus in drawing students to a non-flagship, non-marquee destination for international enrollment. Now we'll talk about an institution that has a little bit more of a cachet. Syracuse University, global brand, global reach. They hosted an online open house this past April where they actually organized 16 live presentations over a two-day period, and they made that content both available live and on demand immediately after each broadcast. So one of the challenges that you see with just hosting a general webinar, one is accessibility in these international markets, but two is even if they are, once a live broadcast is done on your Zoom or your WebEx, it's done and gone until you take that recording, post it somewhere, somewhere, recirculate a link, which adds a lot of friction and adds a lot of barriers to students who might miss that second email with that link. So what's nice about the Conduit platform is once a presentation is completed, it's available on that same page on demand so that those links don't break and students can get access to that content. And you see the numbers there. They reached 700 students live plus a nearly additional 150 additional students on demand. So they were able to keep that content continuously available, providing that global reach without having to leave campus. And then of course, they don't have unlimited time and resources, so they leveraged the Platform Q education team to do the email and text message marketing ahead of time to drive that event attendance. So literally all they needed to do was show up with their smile and slides and be able to host the presentations and answer student questions. So taking that stress of driving the event attendance off of their team so they could focus on generating the good content. Now, we've been through those five best practices. I want to give one example of how you can get started immediately with these types of programs. There can be a little bit of a feeling of overwhelming building out a platform, building out a promotion campaign, developing the content. I want to take a look at Missouri S&T. So Missouri S&T is a new partner for Platform Q Education. They signed on late in the enrollment process, but they wanted to make sure that they were boosting engagement, particularly with students in the India market. We were able to get their event scheduled, produced, and promoted in 13 days. And they were able to connect with 16 students from their India prospect pool. Now imagine, trying to reach 16 students in India without having to fly on a plane to multiple markets and those sorts of things, right? So by leveraging our tools and our communication programs, they were able to just, again, show up with their smile and slides and get started in 2 weeks or less. So if you're thinking about how do I develop a program, especially that is use the Pacific example of a pre-orientation type program to keep students engaged throughout the summer, that's something that could realistically be developed in under 2 weeks in partnership with Platform Q Education and the development of our platform. So thinking about that, from a combination of strategy and support perspective, if you have any questions or want to get in touch with anyone on our team, we encourage you to get in touch with me, and we'll get you connected with the right representatives for your region to help to develop those strategies. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave the chat tool open for a little bit to answer any questions that you might have. Feel free to reach out to me. My email and phone number are there as well. Happy to answer any questions offline, not via the chat tool if that's better for you. But thank you so much for taking a little bit of time out of your day today to learn about the top trends and to learn a little bit more about how we might be able to help. Thanks so much. Have a great day.